The purpose of this video is to talk to you a little bit about the preterite tense in Spanish. And I do apologize in advance. This video will be one of my longer videos as the preterite is a pretty complex topic in Spanish. As you know, the preterite is one of the two past tenses, and it's generally used for completed actions in the past. We also tend to translate the preterite with ed. So she walked to the store last night. He watched Netflix yesterday, so on and so forth. As we look at conjugating the preterite, first we're going to talk about regular preterite verbs. To conjugate preterite verbs that end in AR, we're going to remove that AR and add the following endings. Aste, o, amos, astes, aron for an AR verb. So take a verb like hablar. You chop off your hablar, you end up with, you chop off your AR in hablar, you end up with hablé, hablaste, habló, hablamos, hablastes, and hablaron. For an ER or an IR verb, we chop off that ER or IR and we add back E, iste, io, imos, istes, and ieron. So take a basic verb like comer that you're very familiar with, to eat. You remove that ER and you get comí, comiste, comió, comimos, comistes, and comieron. As we look at conjugating these verbs, number one says, primero, Brianna abrir su libro y luego sacó su lápiz. So first, Brianna opened her book and then she got out her pencil. We're going to take this verb abrir and conjugate it in the preterite. We should remove the IR. We know that Brianna in this case would be she or ella, so we should use the IO ending. Our final answer, Brianna abrió su libro. She opened her book. Abrió. I want you to take a moment, pause your audio, and please give numbers 2 through 5 a quick try. When you're ready, you can unpause. Okay, now that you've had a second to try these, let's take a look. Number 2 says, por fin, Colby terminar la tarea. So finally, Colby finished his homework. In this case, terminar, we need to take off the AR. It needs to agree with Colby or he. So in this case, we should add the ending of an O. Colby terminó la tarea. Number 3 says that ayer ella aprender los pasos al tango. So yesterday she learned the steps of the tango. We're going to take aprender. We're going to chop off our ER to say that she learned. We're adding back again an IO. So we should say that ella aprendió los pasos al tango. Number 4, Brianna y Kevin llevar suéteres la semana pasada. So Brianna and Kevin carried sweaters, or they brought their sweaters last week. We're going to take llevar, we're going to chop off our AR, and in this case, since we're talking about Brianna and Kevin, or they, we're going to use the ellos form ending of aron, and our final answer here was llevaron suéteres la semana pasada. Finally, number 5, Keith began empezar a tocar la guitarra. We're going to take the verb empezar, chop off our AR. Keith would be he or él. So in this case, we need to add an O with an accent. We should say that Keith empezó a tocar la guitarra. Okay, I want to talk to you next about some irregular yo verbs in the preterite tense. And there are a variety of irregular yo verbs, but we've sort of nicknamed these as car, gar, or sar verbs. And we're going to begin by talking about car verbs. This is not a comprehensive list, but these are some of the most commonly used cargar sar verbs that you see in the Spanish language. We have suplicar, which is to beg, tocar, to play as in to play music, jugar, to play as in to play a sport, pagar, to pay, apagar, to turn off, comenzar, to start, cazar, to hunt, and danzar, to dance. These are your commonly used cargar sar verbs. So, let's take a look at the verb tocar. If you didn't know this was a car verb and it was irregular, you'd probably start by chopping off your AR And you'd want to add your regular preterite endings of aste, o, amos, aste, cenaron. And that would almost be perfectly right, except for the yo form. As I said, these are irregular yo verbs, in which case, rather than just removing the AR, you're going to remove the entire car. And your final answer here, the car is going to be replaced with K. So try to remember in your brain, car verbs change to K. So instead of tose, we get toque. Toque. Toque la guitarra. Next, we'll talk about gar verbs. Jugar is a very common gar verb. Again, if you didn't know this was a gar verb, you'd probably start by removing your AR, by adding your regular preterite endings of aste, o, amos, astes, aron, and you would be totally correct, except for the yo form. Car verbs, car, they change to ke, and gar verbs, gar, they change to ge, gue. So our yo form here becomes yo jugué. I played. Yo jugué. Next, we'll talk about sar verbs. Verbs that end in sar, you're going to follow the same process. Chop off your AR, add back your regular preterite endings, aste, o, amos, astes, and aron. But in this case, your zar verbs, the ZAR, changes to a CE or se. So you get almorcé. All the other forms are normal. So the cheat here, or the trick, is to remember that car verbs change to ke, gar verbs change to ge, and sar verbs change to se. And in each of these instances, it's only the yo form that is affected by the change. All right, so as always, I want to give you a little bit of an opportunity to practice here. I'm going to do number 1 with you, and then I'm going to let you pause your audio and give 2 through 5 a try. So we look at number 1. It gives us yo and jugar, I and to play. We know that jugar is a gar verb, and therefore we are talking about the yo form. Gar, in this case, will change to ge. So we got yo jugué. I played. Yo jugué. Please go ahead, take a moment, pause your audio, and give numbers 2 through 5 a quick try for me. All right, now you've had a second to try these. Number 2 says tú and jugar. Well, this is a gar verb, but it's not the yo form. Remember that only the yo form is irregular with car, gar, sar verbs. So we can treat this like a regular old preterite verb. We can chop off our AR and jugar and add back aste. Tú jugaste. You played. Same thing with number 3. Tocar is a car verb, but in this case, it's not in the yo form. So el and tocar, we're going to chop off our AR and tocar. We're left with toc, T-O-C. And to say that he played, we should get tocó. Tocó, he played. Tocó. Number 4, though, it is a car verb and it is in the yo form. So in this case, we know that car verbs change to que. We should get toque. Number 5, nosotros and pagar. Again, this is not a yo form verb, so we can conjugate pagar by chopping off the AR and adding amos. Pagamos. Okay, we've talked about regular preterite AR and ER and IR verbs. We talked about those irregular yo form verbs like cargar, sar. Next, I want to talk to you about stem changers and the preterite. Now, you may remember when thinking back to Spanish 1, how we had some stem changers from O to UE and E to IE and E to I. We called those boot verbs because you saw a change in each form. For example, the verb poder meant to be able to, and the O of poder changed to a UE, but it only changed when it was inside the boot. It did not change in every single form, only when it was inside the boot, basically in all the forms except for the nosotros and the vosotros. Our O changed to a UE. We chopped off our ER, we added our regular endings. Puedo, puedes, puede, podemos, podes, and pueden. The O only changed to a UE when it was inside the boot. That's a little flashback to present tense stem changers. Now in the preterite, what you need to know, this only affects verbs that end in IR. But if you have a verb that is an IR verb that had a stem change back in the present tense, then in the preterite, it's also going to change, but it has a shortened stem change. and it only happens in the third person singular and plural forms. For this reason, these have come to be known as what are called sandal verbs. Okay, so you had boot verbs that changed in all the forms except for the nosotros and the vosotros, and you have sandal verbs that only change in the bottom left and bottom right boxes, the third person singular and plural. Again, I want to emphasize this only applies to IR verbs. So if it was an IR verb that had a stem change in the present, it's still going to stem change, but only in the sandal. If it was an AR or an ER verb that had a stem change in the present, it does not have a stem change in the preterite. So make sure you're remembering that. It's only these IR verbs. Here are some examples. The verb dormir, to sleep. Dormir had a stem change in the present tense from O to UE. Therefore, in the preterite, rather than changing from O to UE in all the boxes, in the shoe, in the boot, it's only going to change from O to U. It has a shortened stem change. So instead of changing from O to UE, it only changes from O to U, and it only changes in the preterite, third person, singular, and plural forms, basically known as the sandal. So you get durmió and durmieron. Okay, another example here. We have an IR verb, mentir, which means to lie. In the present tense, mentir has a stem change from E to IE. Therefore, in the preterite, it's going to have a shortened stem change. It's only going to change from E to I. And it's going to change only in the sandal, okay, only in the third person singular and plural. Unlike mentir in the present tense, which had an E to IE stem change and changed in the boot, in the preterite, it only changes in the sandal, and it has a shortened stem change just from E to I. So you get mintió and mintieron. Okay, some additional examples here. The verb servir, to serve, formerly had an E to I stem change. It still has an E to I stem change, can't really shorten that. So still has an E to I stem change, but instead of changing in all of the boxes in the boot, it only changes in the sandal. So sirvió and sirvieron in the third person singular and plural forms. Okay, I want to give you a chance to practice with these. So I want you to pretend for a second that hay un nuevo camarero en el restaurante de Moe's. There's a new waiter at Moe's. ¿Qué pidieron los clientes y qué les sirvió el camarero? What did the people in the restaurant, what did the clients order, and what did the waiter serve them? So in the model here, I've given you the subject of yo, I've given you some rice, arroz, and I've given you a potato, a papa. So you're trying to say in English that I ordered rice and the waiter served me a potato. So I have yo pedir el arroz y el camarero me sirvió una papa. Notice in this case that sirvió only has, instead of servió, it became sirvió because it normally was an IR verb that had a stem change in the present tense from E to IE. So therefore in the preterite, it's only changing from E to I, hence sirvió. I want you to try a few of these. Number one, it says Riley. It has a burger and then some soup. So you're trying to say that Riley ordered a hamburger and the waiter served him some soup. So Riley ordered. Think about pedir. It is an E to IE stem change in the present tense. Therefore in the preterite, it's only going to change from E to I. We get Riley pidió una hamburguesa. And the waiter served him, again, servir normally has a stem change from E to I. So in this case, it's only going to change still from E to I, but only in the third person singular and plural forms. So Riley pidió una hamburguesa y el camarero le sirvió una sopa. Here's one more for you to try. Number two says yo. It gives you a refresco and leche. You're trying to say that I ordered a soft drink and the waiter served me some milk. So yo pedí, because it's not in the third person singular or plural form, and the waiter served me some milk. Well, think about servir. In this case, servir normally has a stem change from E to I in the present tense. So in the preterite, it's still going to change from E to I, but only in the third person singular and plural. So we get yo pedí un refresco Y el camarero me sirvió una leche. Okay, we've talked about a lot so far. We talked about regular preterite, AR, ER, and IR verbs. We talked about car, gars, R verbs, which are only irregular in the yo form. Remember, car verbs change to que, gar verbs change to ge, and sar verbs change to se. We've also talked about stem changing verbs. Remember, this only affects verbs that are IR verbs that had a stem change in the present tense. In the preterite, they have a shortened stem change. Instead of changing from O to UE, they're only changing from O to U. And instead of E to IE, only E to I. And E to I verbs still change from E to I. All of that happens only in the Sandal, in the third person singular and plural forms. Next, I want to talk to you about some verbs that are just very irregular in the preterite. These are verbs that you simply do have to memorize. Our first line here, ir, ser, dar, and ver, are part of what we refer to as the verbos cortos category. Verbos cortos. These are verbs that you just have to memorize, and they do have some regularity about them. They're very short, and I'll talk to you about those in a second. Hacer, querer, and venir are part of what we refer to as the I group. Saber, poder, and poner are part of what we refer to as the U group. Decir, traer, and conducir form up the J group. And tener, andar, and estar also are part of the U group as well, sometimes called the UV group, depending on who you talk to. So, as we look at these, I want to start with the verbos cortos, and I've color coordinated all these for a reason. You're going to see why in just a second. I want to start with the verbos cortos, these short verbs. You can see here we have ir and ser, dar and ver. And I always tell students just to memorize the first form, the yo form of all of these. So you have fui, di, and vi. So ir and ser become fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuistes, and fueron. Ir and ser do have the same conjugation in the preterite. So I went and I was are the same. You have to look at the context of the sentence, but remember just fui. Fui. Dar becomes di, diste, dio, dimos, distes, and dieron. So I gave, you gave, he or she gave, so on and so forth. So fui, di. Let's look at ver. Ver becomes vi, viste, vio, vimos, vistes, and vieron. And you can conjugate these in their various forms. Vi, viste, vio, vimos, vistes, vieron. So remember, just the yo form for now. Fui, di, vi. All of these verbs in the verbos cortos use these same endings of e, iste, o, imos, istes, and hieron. The I group is also going to use these endings. So, as you take a look here, the I group consists of hacer, to do or to make, querer, to want, and venir, to come. You can see these all have their own stem changes, which involve an I in the stem, hence why they're called part of the I group. You get is, quis, and vin. So you can conjugate these all the way through. Hice, hiciste, hizo, hicimos, hicistes, hicieron. Quise, quisiste, quiso, quisimos, quisistes, quisieron. Vine, viniste, vino, vinimos, vinistes, vinieron. Again, try to memorize just the yo form. Hice, quise, vine. Hice, quise, vine. So again, we had fui, di, vi. Here we have hice, quise, vine. And notice I did put in this in red down here. It's not ico with a co. The C changes to a z, so you get iso. As we keep moving, notice the U group also uses these same endings. E, iste, o, imos, ises, and hieron. So green and purple use the same endings. Red mostly uses these endings except for the le usted form. You have fue and dio and such. As you look here at the purple forms in the U group, saber, to know, becomes sup, Poder, to be able to, becomes pud, and poner, to put, becomes pus. So as you throw your endings on there, iste, o, imos, iste, hicieron, you get supe, supiste, supo, supimos, supistes, and supieron. Pude, pudiste, pudo, pudimos, pudistes, pudieron. And puse, pusiste, puso, pusimos, pusistes, and pusieron. So again, try to remember just the yo form. Supe, pude, puse. Let's go back through. So, fui, ti, vi. Hice, quise, vine. Supe, pude, puse. As we look at the UV group here, tener becomes tuv, andar, anduv, and estar, estuv. And again, using the same endings. Iste, o, imos, istes, hieron. So here you get tuve, tuviste, tuvo, tuvimos, tuvistes, tuvieron. Anduve, anduviste, anduvo, anduvimos, anduvistes, anduvieron. And estuve, estuviste, estuvo, estuvimos, estuvistes, estuvieron. So again, try to remember just the yo form here. If you can remember the yo, you can unlock all the others because you know they use the same set of endings. So tuve, anduve, estuve. Okay, and finally, the J group here in yellow has their own set of endings. Notice it's almost exactly the same as all the other letters. The difference here is the el, ella, usted form, which is just eron instead of ieron. So let's look at some examples. You have decir. We call this the J group because they all receive a J in their stem. So decir becomes di, traer, tra, and conducir, conduj. When we add our endings on there, we get dije, dijiste, dijo, dijimos, dijistes, and dijeron. Dijeron. Notice not dijeron, but dijeron. Traje, trajiste, trajo, trajimos, trajistes, and trajeron. Not trajeron, but trajeron. Just E-R-O-N. So basically the J group in the third person plural loses the I. And then conduje, condujiste, condujo, condujimos, condujistes, and condujeron. Now, you'll notice I was sort of forming a song here as I went through. If you can remember the yo form, you can unlock all of the others. So, I've given you a little song here. Fui, di, vi, hice, quise, vine yo, supe, pude, puse yo, dije, traje, conduje yo, tuve, anduve, estuve yo. Now, be grateful you're not in my in-person class because I would make you sing that. However, I am going to show you a little YouTube video here of someone else singing that. So, take a moment and watch this.
Action! Action! Attention! Live, 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 live. Wait, deep. Wait, deep. He say, video. He say, video. Puse, supeo. Supeo. Dije, traje, que tuve yo. Sube, supeo. Supeo. Justo. Preterite. Irregular. Ahora yo te lo quiero.
Okay, so you have a little video there to help you if you need some assistance in remembering. I also have another funny video which just kind of reviews some of those same things that I also think will help you in memorizing some of these verbs. So let's take a look at this one.
If you want to learn how to conjugate the irregulars of the preterite, 12 words, remember them. Remember they have stems. You have to practice them. Preterite irregulars. Okay, you need to know the endings and the stem, but they're irregular accents, you don't need them. Eliminate the accents, you don't need no accents. Please don't put no accents, and that's why I'm gonna practice irregulars. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu, you're irregular. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu, you're irregular. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu, you're irregular. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu. Andar is undo, estar is estuve, tenor change to two, venir vin acer is querer quis, poner poder pus pud, decir traer ditra, conducir condu, oh I acentos. Okay, you need to know the endings and the stem, but they're irregular accents, you don't need them. Eliminate the accents, you don't need no accents. Please don't put no accents, and that's why I'm gonna practice irregulars. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu, you're irregular. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu, you're irregular. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu, you're irregular. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu. One thing I ask of you, don't forget Sarah ear in Darbatu. From undo, vestuve to tracondu. There are four others, but no stem for you. So conjugate them, but no accents too. I'll give you a nice beat you can practice too. Practice them even when it's not natural. I mean, it's all irregular. We could first start off with ear and Sarah and finish off with dar and bear. There are no stems, these you memorize. Here you go, time to give it a try. Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fueron. Vivi, se vio, vimos, vieron. Didi, se dio, dimos, dieron. Irregular, done. Don't get confused, no accents. Those are the four. Plus 12. Don't forget it. Isteo, himos, vieron. No acentos. Hey. People, can you see how these words change? You can leave it be, or they will look real strange. Don't leave the ending, now add the stem. You're almost done. I always practice my irregular. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu, you're irregular. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu, you're irregular. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu, you're irregular. Undo this tooth tooth, Vinis keys poos poot, soup di tracondu.
Okay, so that does not get them stuck in your head. I do not know what will. But hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay, we're going to wrap up this video just by giving you a little bit of practice with these irregular verbs as always. So I'll do a couple with you. Tu and ir. You know that ir is irregular. The yo form, if we sing our song, fui, fuiste, fue. We know that fui is the yo form. The tu form should be fuiste. So tu, fuiste. Go ahead and take a moment, pause your audio, give the rest of these a try for me, please. When you're ready, you can unpause. All right, now that you've had a second to try these, let's take a look. Number 2 says ellos and hacer. We know that hacer is part of the I group preterite, so if we sing our song, fui, ti, vi, hice. Hice is the yo form. We know that in the ellos form, the ending should be hicieron, so we get hicieron as our final answer. Number 3, nosotros and ser. Ser is part of the fui part of our song. In the we form, we should have fuimos. Number 4 is regular. It says Matthew and comer. To say that Matthew ate, we're going to take our er off of comer, and we should add an io. So Matthew comió. Number 5, doctora Macion hablar. To say that she spoke, we're going to take our ar off of hablar and add an o with an accent, habló. Just plain old normal preterite. Number 6, ver is irregular. Remember the first line of your song, fui, ti, vi. To say I saw, we would say vi. To say that Blake, that he saw, we would say vio. Number 4, Emily and Lake dar, they gave. Well, we know that dar is also irregular, part of our first line of our song, fui, di, vi. In the ellos, ellas, ustedes form, we should have dieron. Number 8, nosotros en saber. We know that saber is part of our you group. The stem changes to sup, and then the we form ending should be supimos. Supimos. Number 9, ellos and estar. To say that you all were, estar, is part of our UV group. The yo form was estuve, the stem there being estuve. And in the ellos form, we would add back the ieron ending. You should end up with estuvieron. Finally, our last one here, number 10, says Riley y tú. So to say that you all have, or you all do, or you all make, you could use either the ustedes or the vosotros form here, depending on your preference, but you would end up with either hicieron or hicistes. Guys, as always, I know the preterite, in my opinion, is one of the hardest tenses in the Spanish language, so I've listed the Conjuguemos site down here for you at the bottom. I strongly recommend to review the preterite, and especially the irregular preterite and the stem-changing preterite and the cargar verbs, that you spend some time on Conjuguemos reviewing those. As always, I hope this video has been helpful to you in understanding how to use the preterite. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at any time, and hope you guys have a wonderful day. Take care.